Hello, hello, and how are you? Sorry for the quick look sideways. I think we might have an internet problem at our house. I'm just waiting to see if it's going to show up on the other monitor as being a problem. It should be showing up here any second now. Any second. Any second. Please, please, please. Here it comes. I'll be able to see myself on the other monitor. Maybe. Sorry, I've just got someone sent me a message about this. Yeah, saying it's not looking that stable on their end either. Somebody else in the house. So I'm thinking that our modem might need restarting, or there's something happening down the road between us and the exchange. There's a little telephone exchange down the road from us, and all our internet connection goes through there. Used to be our phone too. Actually, our phone still does, but it's a mobile one because they've got a tower there as well. Anyway, none of that really has anything to do with you, I hope. Hopefully this will carry on. I'm just going to give this another reload on the other page because that's where it tells me what's going on. It's still showing as being unstable, which will mean that you're not going to see a high quality version of what we're doing. Sorry about that. This is if you're watching it live. If I disappear for a little while, it'll be because somebody in the house has gone to restart the modem in the hopes that this is actually going to improve. Don't go away. If that happens, don't panic. Don't go away. Just wait. The stream will be back. Okay? We'll see what happens. I'm hoping there's not going to be any problems like that. I'll just put that back onto that view so I can see what's going on. Right. Personal semi-panic over. I hope that you are well and safe. I know that there's a lot going on at the moment with things happening over in countries that probably are better not named in this context, just because this is meant to be a family-friendly thing and I don't want to get people overstressed. I also happen to know that there are some weather issues in the country next door to us. I've got friends over there who've been contemplating having to do a little bit of extra swimming. I saw photos of a place that they normally ride their e-scooter through. There's no way you'd do that at the moment. It's like a little lake. Well, not so little lake. And that's the road. Yes, there's some weird stuff happening at the moment. But as I say, I hope that you personally are in a safe place and reasonably well. And if you are not, I pray that you will be soon. But this really, I do apologise because there's not a lot I can do to help with that side of it, except for give you some entertainment. If you're able to watch this, wonderful. If you are amused by this, even better. That's good. We'll go for that. That's a win. Anyway. Hi. If you're new here, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's books and I get very, very easily distracted because I have ADHD and I'm neurodivergent, which means my brain works in a different manner to what a lot of people's brains work. But that's all good. You have the advantage in this situation because it means that you get to be entertained by me getting lost on the page when I'm reading. Yes, it is possible to do, even when I'm reading to myself silently. It happens. I will get partway through something. Some words in a sentence will remind me of something. My brain will go off on a little rabbit trail, even though my eyes are still taking in the words. And then my brain will come back and go, oh, hang on, where did we get up to? And I have no idea whereabouts on the page I got to, and I have to find it again. Anyway, it's all very amusing. Plus, I can't, as you can tell, I can't keep my face straight. I'm not very good at that. And in addition to that, if we have any accents that come up in the story, they are, terrible. Is about the best word for it. Amusing is another good word for it. And just so you know, it's disappointingly, we have no illustrations for this book. I am not quite sure why. I'm fairly certain that at some stage the book was published with illustrations, but I haven't been able to find any anywhere on the internet, except for there's a PDF that I have of the book. It's a fully legal one that you're allowed to download, and it has some illustrations, but the actual pages of it, when you put it to full-size pages, the pages are this big on the screen of the computer. And so therefore, if you make it bigger so you can look at them a bit better, because it's got all the words as well as the pictures on it, everything is pixelated, very badly pixelated. So I'm not quite sure even why that's available. I'm looking around to see what else I've got in front of me to remind me. I told you, ADHD. Remind me what else we're doing. We are currently reading The Phoenix and the Carpet by Edith Nesbit. It is the sequel to Five Children and It, which means there's going to be a lot of shenanigans of varying sorts. We'll see. Apparently the Samiad, that's the character, the sand fairy character that was in the first book, Five Children and It, that's the It of Five Children and It. We don't come across him, the children don't come across him in the story directly, but he is referenced in the story. There is a third book in the series called The Amulet. We haven't got that far yet. We'll probably read some other books, give us some other flavours and tastes of stories, and then we'll come back and read that third sequel, the third book, the second sequel. I found that we tend to do a little bit better if we don't read two books in a row in a series or by the same author, just because otherwise it can get a little bit same, and it's like, oh, goodness me, do we have to go through this sort of stuff again? Whereas if you just read one book on its own, it's lots of fun. And there are other books that we will be able to read sequels of as well, such as the Just William books. We've had two of those books from that series already. So before I start reading, I do have a hint, a tip, or two, or three. One, have something to drink with you, because it keeps your brain alive, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it working well to be hydrated. So this is my water bottle. I have it here next to me on my desk. Actually, I'll take... Ooh, I've just realised my microphone's a long way away, so I must be sounding terrible. I'll take my lid off. I'll just grab the microphone too. I take the lid off my water bottle so it doesn't squeak into my microphone. Get my headphones out of the way as well, and move the cable back onto the desk where it's meant to be, not the normal cable. This is a cable to add a component into the other computer, which I didn't actually need because there was a spare one inside it already. Someone who had set it up well. Yes, I'm still on a two-computer system, hoping that this one is not going to completely fail for a little while yet, because I really want to get the other one set up fully before I have to commit to doing everything on the one computer. It will be better than the current one is, because it has twice the RAM. Here's another aside for you. If you are not a computer person and want to understand a little bit, like a parable or a illustration of what some of the terminology of computers can relate to, so that you understand the effects that they have. If you have a computer, people will say, how much RAM has it got? And how big is the hard drive? And you're like, I don't know, the numbers on the page for the information that we received that I hid in the drawer because it was scary, because I don't understand anything of it. You might not have, but hey, if you did, this might help. So, imagine you're working in an office and you have a desk. On your desk, you can put a certain number of, you can put papers to look at, to be able to be able to work on them. So if you're using something like the school desk, which has a tabletop about this big, you can't really put a lot of papers on it. You can put the one that you're writing on, and maybe a book next to it, or something else that is similar size to what you're working on it. And then you can look from one to the other and you can work on that okay. Now, if you're doing a bit of intensive research, you're going to have half a dozen books at least, plus some other papers, and you may actually be wanting to also look at some pictures to do with what you're doing. And to do that on your little school desk is going to be quite frustrating, because you have to keep rearranging books and papers and stacking them on top of each other so you can look at whatever it is that's the current focus. And it takes you a lot longer to do any work when you are stuck with this tiny workspace. Okay, so your desktop there, the tabletop that you're working on, if you had a big old-fashioned office one that had for such as like where it's got a cupboard down each side underneath, and it's made out of oak, and it's got a leather blotter pad area, and it's got a pen holder at the back and a lamp, like a banker's lamp with the frosted green glass lampshade on it and all this sort of stuff. And it's this great big huge desk, and you can have all of those things spread out only one layer deep, and you can just look up and glance across at everything you need immediately. Now imagine you're working on several projects at once, and that complicates it even more. So for illustration purposes, the amount of RAM you have, and it doesn't even matter what that means, doesn't matter what a computer person tells you, what those words mean will not affect your daily life, but understanding the effect that they have on what you're doing will. So the amount of RAM you have is like how big your desk is for being able to spread out everything to work on, and whether you have to shuffle things around to be able to do it. There's a limit to the RAM size thing. So a bigger one is going to make things a bit faster and easier to work on than a smaller one. So if you have a computer that has 8 gig of RAM, and it doesn't matter what the numbers and gigs mean, they are just representative, okay? If it has 8 gig of RAM, it's like a school desk, and if it has 32 gig of RAM, it's 4 times that size. It's 8, 16. 16 is 2 of 8, so you do 16 again, so that means it's 4 times as big. So therefore, you can spread everything out, and it works better. That's the desk part of it. Your hard drive space, or your SSD, which a lot of people have now, is your filing cabinet where you put everything away. And if you have lots of room in each of the drawers in the filing cabinet, then you can find things easily, because you can slide them backwards and forwards. You can keep them in alphabetical order much more easily, things like that. If you've got a single drawer and it's packed full, it's going to be quite hard to use it, to find things, to put things in. If you've got 4 drawers and each drawer is only about a quarter full, and you've got room to move things around and stuff like that, it's a lot easier to store things, and you can store a lot more in it. So the size of your filing cabinet is like the size of your hard drive. So there you go. That's your computer lesson for today. But don't tell a computer person that that's what it means. That's how it makes it easier for us normal people to understand why it makes a difference to how well our computer works. That's the only reason I've shared that with you. Anyway, you don't need any of that. What I was originally going to talk about was tips and things you need. Water, something, or whatever your favorite drink is. But for me, I do drink things like coffee and stuff like that. But for keeping my brain going, water is brilliant. If you have it in something like tea, it takes longer for your body to process it before it becomes available to hydrate your brain and your muscles and your other organs in your body to keep you working well. Anytime there's anything but water that you're drinking, it takes a lot longer for your body to process. So water is good. So having something to drink, having something to snack on, and in my case today, I have cheese and crackers, and somewhere comfortable to sit, unless you're having to work or you're studying and you are one of those lie on the floor people or working at a standing desk, if you're otherwise relaxing and listening, find yourself somewhere comfortable, because it's much easier to enjoy a story when you are comfortable. And the last little thing is, this is much more like bedtime stories than an audiobook, because as you've already seen, there's a lot of yakking going on, a lot of asides, a lot of interruptions, which don't really matter if you're expecting them. If you're expecting a pure experience, such as a wonderfully sound engineered audiobook, then you've come to the wrong place. Go and find something else to listen to, unless you're after something different for a change and you're prepared to be persuaded that it is okay to have something different. Still, sorry, we've still got this unstable internet connection. I can't do anything about it without restarting the modem, but I'm not going to, because I'm just going to get on with reading the story. So here we go. iPad mini, first generation, old stuff. It still works for reading books. So here we go with reading. We are reading The Phoenix and the Carpet by E. Nesbit. And this is chapter 2, The Topless Tower. Tower without a top to it. The children had seen the phoenix egg hatched in the flames in their own nursery grate, and had heard from it how the carpet on their own nursery floor was really the wishing carpet. Ooh. And in our first chapter, we had found out why they needed this new carpet in their house. And if you missed that, then go and read the previous story that we've already recorded for you. And that's when the fun begins. So, how the carpet on their own nursery floor was really the wishing carpet, which would take them anywhere they chose. The carpet had transported them to bed just at the right moment, and the phoenix had gone to roost on the cornice supporting the window curtains of the boys' room. So the cornice is kind of like a window frame surround, old building term for it. Don't worry about it. "Excuse me," said a gentle voice, and a courteous beak opened very kindly and delicately the right eye of Cyril. So, excuse me, and the bird opened Cyril's eye. "I hear the slaves below preparing food. Awaken!" A word of explanation and arrangement. "I do wish you wouldn't." The phoenix stopped speaking and fluttered away crossly to the cornice pole, for Cyril had hit out, as boys always do when they are awakened suddenly, and the phoenix was not used to boys, and his feelings, if not his wings, were hurt. "Sorry," said Cyril, coming awake all in a minute. "Do come back. What was it you were saying? Something about bacon and rations?" The phoenix fluttered back to the brass rail at the foot of the bed. "I say, you are real," said Cyril. "How ripping! And the carpet?" "The carpet is as real as it ever was," said the phoenix, rather contemptuously. "But of course a carpet's only a carpet, whereas a phoenix is superlatively a phoenix." "Yes, indeed," said Cyril. "I see it is. Oh, what luck! Wake up, Bobs." That's Robert, his brother. "There's jolly well something to wake up for today, and it's Saturday too." "I've been reflecting," said the phoenix, "during the silent watches of the night, and I could not avoid the conclusion that you were quite insufficiently astonished at my appearance yesterday. The ancients were always very surprised. Did you by chance expect my egg to hatch?" "Not us," said Cyril. "And if we had," said Anthea, who had come in her nightie when she heard the silvery voice of the phoenix, "we could never have expected it to hatch anything so splendid as you." The bird smiled. "Perhaps you've never seen a bird smile." "You see," said Anthea, wrapping herself in the boys' counterpane, that's like their duvet, the top cover of their bed, the counterpane. It's an old-fashioned word. We get a lot of those. Wrapping herself in the counterpane, for the morning was chill, "We've had things happen to us before," and she told the story of the Samiad, or sand fairy? I need to let go of the mouse because otherwise I might click it on something I shouldn't click it on. Oh dear. My connection is really looking absolutely terrible. I might see if I can get somebody in the house to restart our connection. I will get back to what I was reading to you in a minute. I'm quite distressed by the poor standard of the current connection. I will give you a be right back screen if that happens. I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to still see that. I don't know. Here we go. Shortly, very shortly. Oh yes, I'll just remind you. We got up to Anthea telling the phoenix that they have met the Samiot or sand fairy, and I shall be back shortly, about 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes. Don't go away. Use this time to go to the loo and get something to drink. I'll be back. And I'm back. Hello, how are you? At least I think I am. Hang on. I'm just looking on the other screen, seeing if it's working. Looks like it is. Yes. Well, I'm just waiting for the video to come through. I can see the subtitles, so that means that, captions, the captions, not subtitles. That means that the audio is working. Maybe? This is a bit strange. Just the way it is or isn't working. Normally it will tell me what the quality of the connection is like, and it's not even doing that at the moment. So, okay, it's showing on my phone, and it's kind of, I'm looking at it up close because it's a tiny little picture at the top there, and I'm trying to see how clear it is. And it's not very clear, which means that we still have the problem. And that means that it's actually not our connection that's the problem. It's between us and not even the exchange necessarily. It may actually be the New Zealand connection. It may be that it's the connection between New Zealand and Australia, because some of our technology goes through there. Ah, well, we shall carry on reading, because apparently it's kind of still working. And if it's too bad, I'll have a look at it later on. If it's too bad, I'll do it again next time, or re-record it and then just load the recording up, rather than you having to put up with me broadcasting using exactly the same text. You won't get all this chat between it though. Anyway, right. "You see," said Anthea, wrapping herself in the boy's counterpane, for the morning was chill, "we've had things happen to us before." And she told the story of the Samiad, or sand fairy. I keep looking down because I've got my book right here in my hands, my book being on my iPad mini. "Ah, yes," said the Phoenix, "Samiads were rare even in my time. I remember I used to be called the Samiad of the desert. I was always having compliments paid to me. I can't think why." Oh dear, I think we've got a rather self-important Phoenix. Is this going to cause a problem? We'll find out, I suppose. Let's just keep reading, find out. "Can you give wishes then?" asked Jane, who had now come in too. "Oh dear me, no," said the Phoenix contemptuously. "At least, but I hear footsteps approaching. I hasten to conceal myself." And it did. "I think I said that this day was Saturday. It was also Cook's birthday, and Mother had allowed her and Eliza to go to the Crystal Palace with a party of friends. So that gives you the era of this story. Look up the Crystal Palace, London. It was an exhibition hall, or series of buildings, I suppose, made out of glass, which was why it was called the Crystal Palace. There are people on YouTube who talk about what it used to be like. You can't actually see what it currently looks like because it's just a park. It's got some terraces in it and some ruined bits of bricks and stuff that were towers. So yeah, because they had a fire and a whole lot of stuff like that. But it was a real thing, and it was built for the trade exhibition, the World Trade Show kind of thing. I think that's what it was called. And then it was kept to keep doing that sort of exhibition type thing. And it had garden areas within it. So it was like a huge, enormous, giant greenhouse type thing for parts of it. And other parts, they had little, like, booths that you get at like Comic-Con and all those other sorts of events where you have people set up at different tables representing whatever it is that they do. And so they did this with trade and various things to do with industry, different types of machinery, all sorts of things. So it was a world trade fair, basically. And then they kept this building, and then eventually they wanted that space for something else. So they disassembled it and reassembled it in another piece of land in London. And that whole area is now actually called Crystal Palace, the place it got moved to. And it was there for quite some time and got more and more derelict, and then it ended up getting burnt down. And it wasn't replaced. And I think there were some people who had hoped that they would make an attempt to do basically a replica or a copy of it for one of the millennium type celebrations, but that didn't happen either. Anyway, so in this story, it gives you an idea of the time frame. The Crystal Palace was still in existence. And I don't know if it was still at the trade show stage of its use or not, but we shall read on. They might tell us. So it was also Cook's birthday, and Mother had allowed her and Eliza to go to the Crystal Palace with a party of friends. So Jane and Anthea, of course, had to help make beds and wash up the breakfast cups and little things like that. Robert and Cyril intended to spend the morning in conversation with the phoenix, but the bird had its own ideas about this. And here's one of my asides. Again, this one is more to do with the fact that we are reading old books, and the attitudes and lifestyles contained therein are not necessarily ones that are our attitudes and lifestyles. In that day and age, it was considered reasonably normal. In fact, it was considered very normal, except for by a few people, that women would do women's work and men would do men's work. And so that meant that girls would help with meals and housework and things like that, because that was part of what their life was going to be about. And I'm so glad that we're not like that anymore. It's good to have the skills, but I don't think we need to be fixed on which genders or any gender for doing any particular role. If you're competent at something or if you have an interest in it, I think you should be allowed to do that sort of thing. If you are not, then go and find something that you do have the brain competency and the physical competency or the ability to learn for, and do that and make your way in the world that way. But this is one of the reasons why we read these, is so we can actually learn that the world around us even now is not like exactly where we live. There are other things that go on in other places, and reading books from another time period will help us to understand that people's lives are not all the same as ours. It's easier to understand and accept initially that people from a different time period to ours, but in line with the life that we live, i.e. from the same cultural background or the same part of the world, that their lives were different, because we can see the progression when we talk to parents and grandparents and they tell us stories about when they were young and how much it's changed. So that makes sense to us that things have changed. It's very easy to not initially grasp that people in other countries live differently to us, just because we haven't had an experience that relates to that until we go somewhere else, and we have often a confrontational experience, not in an aggressive way, but just where we go somewhere else and we find it quite uncomfortable. And if we stop and think, why is this uncomfortable? It's often not specifically about the fact that the climate's different and so therefore it's too hot or it's too cold. It's actually because the way they do things there are different to what we're used to. And if we pause and let our minds process that and let go of the emotions that help us to say it has to be like this, because often that's an emotional reaction, we actually will then learn and come to an understanding of the fact that everyone everywhere is trying to live their lives, and the way life is lived in different places can be very different to our own, but no less valid. There's nothing wrong with living in a manner that's different to our own. So reading fiction from a different time period helps us to initiate this understanding in our own heads. And that's a lot of words just to say it's good for your brain and it's good for your mind, It's good for your emotions. It's good for your attitudes to actually read fiction from different time periods because it helps us to get on better with other people in other parts of the world. So there you go. Let's carry on reading. But yeah, that's just because it talks about the girls doing the housework and the boys talking to the phoenix as if that's a purely normal thing, because it was for them. So don't be offended by it, because that means you can't learn from it. If you choose to be offended by something, and yes, it is your choice, if you choose to be offended by something, you will not be able to learn from it, the thing that has confronted you. You can be upset by something. That's not the same as being offended by something. When you are offended, it's because that hurt me. I don't think that should be allowed to do that to me. And we make a choice in that. That's not going to help us to grow. Even if what they did was wrong, we can still choose how we respond. There you go. I think that's enough lessons for now. Let's just read the book and accept the fact that they lived differently to us. The bird had its own ideas about whether or not the boys were going to have a conversation with it. I must have an hour or two's quiet, it said. I really must. My nerves will give way unless I can get a little rest. You must remember, it's 2,000 years since I had any conversation. I'm out of practice, and I must take care of myself. I've often been told that mine is a valuable life. So it nestled down inside an old hat box of father's, which had been brought down from the box room some days before, when a helmet was suddenly needed for a game of tournaments, with its golden head under its golden wing, and went to sleep. Not the helmet, the phoenix in the box. The grammar's not great. Sometimes you get I think it's called a split infinitive, where you have a whole sentence where it's making sense and then you make a break in the middle of it and add some extra information and then you go back to what you were first talking about. Yeah, she tends to do this, but that's probably because that's the way the children often responded to things and spoke about things, and it helps to create the world. So yes, hat boxes, people had hats and they were kept in boxes, and that can include helmets. There you go. We don't tend to do them these days. So it was in the box with its golden head under its golden wing and went to sleep. So then Robert and Cyril moved the table back and were going to sit on the carpet and wish themselves somewhere else. But before they could decide on the place, Cyril said, I don't know, perhaps it's rather sneakish to begin without the girls. There'll be all the morning, said Robert impatiently, and then a thing inside him, which tiresome books sometimes call the inward monitor, said, why don't you help them then? It's his conscience, isn't it? Yeah, we know. That's good. This is good. Cyril's inward monitor happened to say the same thing at the same moment. So the boys went and helped to wash up the teacups and to dust the drawing room. I think this author might be challenging a few people from her day and age that it's okay to do something different. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have a snack. Right. So they were going to help wash up the teacups and dust the drawing room. Robert was so interested in what they were doing that he proposed to clean the front doorsteps, a thing he had never been allowed to do. Nor was he allowed to do it on this occasion. One reason was that it had already been done by Cook. He was probably going to make a bit of a mess, and so it's not something they're going to let him do. Bucket, soap, scrubbing brush, slippery. Yeah, the particular part of London that they lived in, it was a common thing at the time to clean the front steps every day. There was probably a lot of dirt around, and so therefore you didn't want that tracked into the house. If you kept your front steps clean, then it would help to keep the floors inside the house clean, but also it looked nice. Why not? When you've got staff who can do it for you, I suppose. The children come from a family that at the time of its writing, that lifestyle was considered reasonably normal, not particularly fancy. They did go to school, they weren't tutored at home. But yeah, we wouldn't consider it to be a normal lifestyle, not in this day and age for most of us. Anyway, when all the housework was finished, the girls dressed the happy, wriggling baby in his blue highwayman coat and three-cornered hat and kept him amused while Mother changed her dress and got ready to take him over to Granny's. Mother always went to Granny's every Saturday, and generally some of the children went with her, but today they were to stay home. And their hearts were full of joyous and delightful feelings every time they remembered that the house they would have to keep had a phoenix in it and a wishing carpet. You can always keep the lamb, that's the baby, good and happy for quite a long time if you play Noah's Ark game with him. It is quite simple. He just sits on your lap and tells you what animal he is, and then you say the little poetry piece about whatever animal he chooses to be. I'm pretty sure we're going to get what that poem is too. So the lamb is in the other book too. He's a little bit of an inconvenience because he's quite a bit younger than the rest of the children, and sometimes they have to look after him. And it did make for some interesting occasions in the previous story. If you really want to catch up on that, go to my YouTube channel. I will give you the link for that right now if you're watching this on Discord. It's also my profile, which is down below where the video window is at the moment. Go to my YouTube channel and go to the tab that says playlists and look for 5 Children and It. That's the name of it. 5, written as a word, F-I-V-E, 5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. And you'll find the previous book to this one. And you'll be able to listen through it all in one go or video by video. Anyway, I'm going to carry on with the story again. And you say the little poetry piece about whatever animal he chooses to be. Of course, some of the animals, like the zebra and the tiger, haven't got any poetry because they are so difficult to rhyme to. The lamb knows quite well which are the poetry animals. I'm a baby bear, said the lamb, snuggling down, and Anthea began, I love my little baby bear. I love his nose and toes and hair. I like to hold him in my arm and keep him very safe and warm. And when she said very, of course there was a real bear's hug. Then came the eel, and the lamb was tickled till he wriggled exactly like a real one. I love my little baby eel. He is so squidge. I'm trying to sound out this word. S-Q-U-I-D-G-L-E-T-Y. Squidgelety. I think that's meant to be. He is so squidgelety to feel. I love my little baby eel. He is so squidgelety to feel. He'll be an eel when he is big, but now he's just a tiny snig. A snig is one of the names for a baby eel. Perhaps I'm sorry. I should have just kept reading. Perhaps you didn't know that a snig was a baby eel. It is, though, and the lamb knew it. Hedgehog now, he said, and Anthea went on, my baby hedgehog, how I like ye, though your back's so prickly spiky. Your front is very soft, I've found, so I must love you front ways round. And then she loved him front ways round while he squealed with pleasure, so she gave him a big hug with his front towards her front, as if he was a hedgehog and prickly on the back. It is a very baby game, and of course the rhymes are only meant for very, very small people, not for people who are old enough to read books, so I won't tell you any more of them. By the time the lamb had been a baby lion and a baby weasel and a baby rabbit and a baby rat, Mother was ready, and she and the lamb, having been kissed by everybody and hugged as thoroughly as it's possible to be when you're dressed for the outdoors, because it's warm indoors when you're dressed for cold outdoors, was seen to the tram by the boys. When the boys came back, everyone looked at everyone else and said, now! They locked the front door and they locked the back door and they fastened all the windows. They moved the table and chairs off the carpet and Anthea swept it. "We must show it a little attention," she said kindly. "We'll give it tea leaves next time. Carpets like tea leaves." Maybe you want to check that one. I don't know if that's true or not. Then everyone put on its outdoor things because, as Cyril said, they didn't know where they might be going, and it makes people stare if you go out of doors in November in pinafores and without hats, because that's summer clothing. Then Robert gently awoke the phoenix, who yawned and stretched itself, and allowed Robert to lift it onto the middle of the carpet, where it instantly went to sleep again with its crested head tucked under its golden wing as before. Then everyone sat down on the carpet. Where shall we go was of course the question, and it was warmly discussed. Anthea wanted to go to Japan, Robert and Cyril voted for America, and Jane wished to go to the seaside, "because there are donkeys there," she said. "Not in November, silly," said Cyril, and the discussion got warmer and still nothing was settled. "I vote we let the phoenix decide," said Robert at last. So they stroked it till it awoke. "We want to go somewhere abroad," said they, "and we can't make up our minds where." "Let the carpet make up its mind, if it has one," said the phoenix. "Just say you wish to go abroad." And so they did, and the next moment the world seemed to spin upside down, and when it was right way up again, and they were ungiddy enough to look about them, they were out of doors. Out of doors. This is a feeble way to express where they were. They were out of the earth, or off it. In fact, they were floating steadily, safely, splendidly in the crisp, clear air, with the pale, bright blue of the sky above them. And far down below the pale, bright, sun-diamonded waves of the sea, the carpet had stiffened itself somehow so that it was square and firm like a raft, and it steered itself so beautifully and kept on its way so flat and fearless that no one was at all afraid of tumbling off. In front of them lay land. "The coast of France," said the phoenix, waking up and pointing with its wing. "Where do you wish to go? I should always keep one wish, of course, for emergencies, otherwise you may get into an emergency from which you can't emerge at all." But the children were far too deeply interested to listen. Oh dear. "Tell you what," said Cyril, "let's let the thing go on, and when we see a place we really want to stop at, why, we'll just stop. Isn't this ripping?" "It's like trains," said Anthea, as they swept over the low-lying coastland and held a steady course above orderly fields and straight roads bordered with poplar trees. "Like express trains, only in trains you can never see anything because of grown-ups wanting the windows shut, and then they breathe on them and it's like ground glass, and nobody can see anything, and then they go to sleep." "It's like tobogganing," said Robert, "so fast and smooth, only there's no doormat to stop short on. It goes on and on." "You darling phoenix," said Jane. "It's all your doing. Oh, look at that ducky little church and the women with flappy cappy things on their heads." "Don't mention it," said the phoenix with sleepy politeness. "Oh," said Cyril, summing up all the rapture that was in every heart. "Look at it all, look at it, and think of the Kentish town road." I'll keep reading. Everyone looked and everyone thought, and the glorious, gliding, smooth, steady rush went on, and they looked down on strange and beautiful things, and held their breath, and let it go in deep sighs, and said, "Oh," and "Ah," till it was long past dinner time. So it's carrying on for a long time. It was Jane who suddenly said, "I wish we'd brought some jam tart and cold mutton with us. Would have been jolly to have a picnic in the air." Do you remember from the previous book, the children actually hadn't realised it, but they said, "I wish," a lot, and that got them into some trouble. Yeah, I think we're going to have a bit more of that happening here. Hopefully they've learnt from the last set of experiences, and this is just a reminder. The jam tart and cold mutton were, however, far away, sitting quietly in the larder in the house of the house in Camden Town, which the children were supposed to be keeping. A mouse was at that moment tasting the outside of the raspberry jam part of the tart. She had nibbled a sort of gulf or bay through the pastry edge. She wouldn't have been doing that if the children were at home. To see whether it was the sort of dinner she could ask her little mouse husband to sit down to, she had had a very good dinner herself. And nibbling through the pastry. It is an ill wind that blows nobody any good. We'll stop as soon as we see a place, said Anthea. I've got threepence and you boys have the fourpence each that your trams didn't cost the other day, so we can buy things to eat. I expect the Phoenix can speak French. The carpet was sailing along over rocks and rivers and trees and towns and farms and fields. It reminded everybody of a certain time when all of them had had wings, and had flown up to the top of a church tower and had had a feast there of chicken and tongue and new bread and soda water, and this again reminded them how hungry they were. And just as they were all being reminded of this very strongly indeed, they saw ahead of them some ruined walls on a hill, and strong and upright and really to look at, as good as new, a great square tower. The top of that's just exactly the same size as the carpet, said Jane. I think it would be good to go to the top of that, because then none of the Abbey what's-its-names, natives, the residents, would be able to take the carpet away even if they wanted to, and some of us could go out and get things to eat, buy them honestly, not take them out of larder windows, which is what they'd done previously. I think it would be better if we went, Anthea was beginning, but Jane suddenly clenched her hands. I don't see why I should never do anything I want just because I'm the youngest. I wish the carpet would fit itself in at the top of that tower, so there. The carpet made a disconcerting bound, and the next moment it was hovering above the square top of the tower. Then slowly and carefully it began to sink under them. It was like a lift going down with you at the Army and Navy stores. It's a series of department stores. I don't think we ought to wish things without all agreeing to them first, said Robert huffishly. Hello, what on earth? For unexpectedly and greyly, something was coming up all around the four sides of the carpet. It was as if a wall were being built by magic quickness. It was 1 foot high. It was 2 feet high. 3, 4, 5. It was shutting out the light. More and more. Anthea looked up at the sky and the walls that now rose 6 feet above them. We're dropping into the tower, she screamed. There wasn't any top to it, so the carpet's going to fit itself in at the bottom. Robert sprang to his feet. We ought to have... Hello, an owl's nest. He put his knee on a jutting, smooth piece of grey stone and reached his hand into a deep window slit, broad on the inside of the tower and narrowing to a funnel on the outside. Look sharp, cried out everyone, but Robert did not look sharp enough. By the time he had drawn his hand out of the owl's nest, there were no eggs there. The carpet had sunk 8 feet below him. Jump, you silly cuckoo, cried Cyril with brotherly anxiety. But Robert couldn't turn round all in a minute into a jumping position. He wriggled and twisted and got onto the broad ledge, and by the time he was ready to jump, the walls of the tower had risen up 30 feet above the others, who were still sinking with the carpet. And Robert found himself in the embrasure of the window, alone, for even the owls were not at home that day. The wall was smoothish. There was no climbing it. And as for climbing down, Robert hid his face in his hands and squirmed back and back from the giddy verge until the back part of him was wedged quite tight in the narrowest part of the window slit. And window slits are very narrow because they are for defence. They're for being able to shoot an arrow out of, but not have something else being shot in. So it's a very narrow bit that you can get in close and look if you need to, even get in there with your bow and arrow and shoot out of. You can change your angle. It's wide enough to be able to, but others can't get in, so he's not likely to fall out through the back of it. So the back part of him was wedged quite tight in the narrowest part of the window slit. He was safe now, of course, but the outside part of his window was like a frame to a picture of part of the other side of the tower. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was trying to picture what they're talking about. So where he's sitting, it means that he's looking at the shape of the window, and the shape of the window he's looking through, the inside part, means that he's looking across to the other side of the tower. It was very pretty, with moss growing between the stones and little shiny gems, but between him and it there was the width of the tower, and nothing in it but empty air. The situation was terrible. Robert saw in a flash that the carpet was likely to bring them into just the same sort of tight places they used to get into with the wishes that the Psammead had granted them, and the others. Imagine their feelings as the carpet sank slowly and steadily to the very bottom of the tower, leaving Robert clinging to the wall. Robert did not even try to imagine their feelings. He had quite enough to do with his own. But you can. As soon as the carpet came to a stop on the ground at the bottom of the inside of the tower, it suddenly lost that raft-like stiffness which had been such a comfort during the journey from Camden Town to the topless tower, and spread itself limply over the loose stones and little earthy mounds at the bottom of the tower, just exactly like an ordinary carpet. Also, it shrank suddenly so that it seemed to draw away from under their feet, and they stepped quickly off the edges and stood on the firm ground, while the carpet drew itself in till it was its proper size. She had wished for the carpet to fit. That's why. And no longer fitted exactly into the inside of the tower, but left quite a big space all round it. Then across the carpet they looked at each other, and then every chin was tilted up and every eye sought vainly to see where poor Robert had got to. Of course, they couldn't see him, because he had pulled back into the back of the window embrasure. "I wish we hadn't come," said Jane. "You always do," said Cyril briefly. "Look here, we can't leave Robert up there. I wish the carpet would fetch him down." The carpet seemed to wake from a dream and pull itself together. It stiffened itself briskly and floated up between the four walls of the tower. The children below craned their heads back and nearly broke their necks in doing it. The carpet rose and rose. It hung poised darkly above them for an anxious moment or two. Then it dropped down again, threw itself on the uneven floor of the table and tower, and as it did so, tumbled Robert out on the uneven floor of the tower. "Oh, glory," said Robert. "That was a squeak. You don't know how I felt." "I say, I've had about enough for a bit. Let's wish ourselves at home again and have a go at that jam tart and mutton. We can go out again afterwards." "Righto," said everyone, for the adventure had shaken the nerves of all. So they all got onto the carpet again and said, "I wish we were at home." And lo and behold, they were no more at home than before. The carpet never moved. The Phoenix had taken the opportunity to go to sleep. Anthea woke it up gently. "Look here," she said. "I'm looking," said the Phoenix. "We wished to be at home and we're still here." "No," said the Phoenix, looking about it at the high dark walls of the tower. "No, I quite see that." "But we wished to be at home," said Cyril. "No doubt," said the bird politely. "And the carpet hasn't moved an inch," said Robert. "No," said the Phoenix, "I see that it hasn't." "But I thought it was a wishing carpet." "So it is," said the Phoenix. "Then why?" asked the children together. "I did tell you, you know," said the Phoenix, "only you were so fond of listening to the music of your own voices. It is indeed the most lovely music to each of us, and therefore—" "You did tell us what?" interrupted and exasperated. "Why, that the carpet only gives you 3 wishes a day, and you've had them." They're stuck at the bottom of the tower. There was a heartfelt silence. "Then how are we going to get home?" said Cyril at last. "I haven't any idea," said the Phoenix kindly. Can I fly out and get you any little thing?" "How could you carry the money to pay for it?" "It isn't necessary. Birds always take what they want. It's not regarded as stealing. except in the case of magpies. The children were glad to find that they had been right in supposing this to be the case on the day when they had wings, and they had enjoyed somebody else's ripe plums at the time. "Yes, let the phoenix get us something to eat anyway," Robert urged. "If it will be so kind, you mean," corrected Anthea in a whisper. "If it will be so kind, and we can be thinking while it's gone." So the phoenix fluttered up through the grey space of the tower and vanished at the top, and it was not till it had quite gone that Jane said, "Suppose it never comes back." It was not a pleasant thought, and though Anthea at once said, "Of course it will come back. I'm certain it's a bird of its word," a further gloom was classed by the idea. For, curiously enough, there was no door to the tower, and all the windows were far, far too high to be reached by the most adventurous climber. It was cold, too, and Anthea shivered. "Yes," said Cyril, "it's like being at the bottom of a well." The children waited in a sad and hungry silence and got little stiff necks with holding their heads back to look up the inside of the tall grey tower to see if the phoenix were coming. At last it came. It looked very big as it fluttered down between the walls, and as it neared them, the children saw that its bigness was caused by a basket of boiled chestnuts, which it carried in one claw. In the other, it held a piece of bread, and in its beak was a very large pear. The pear was juicy and as good as a very small drink. When the meal was over, everyone felt better, and the question of how to get home was discussed without any disagreeableness. Makes quite a difference if you're not hungry, doesn't it? Or even out of the town, without any disagreeableness. But no one could think of any way out of the difficulty, or even out of the tower. For the phoenix, though its beak and claws had fortunately been strong enough to carry food for them, was plainly not equal to flying through the air with 4 well-nourished children. "We must stay here, I suppose," said Robert at last, "and shout out every now and then, and someone will hear us and bring ropes and ladders and rescue us like out of mines, and they'll set up a subscription to send us home like castaways." "Yes, but we shan't be home before Mother is, and then Father will take away the carpet and say it's dangerous or something," said Cyril. "I do wish we hadn't come," said Jane, and everyone else said, "Shut up," except Anthea, who suddenly awoke the phoenix and said, "Look here, I believe you can help us. Oh, I do wish you would." "I will help you as far as lies in my power," said the phoenix at once. "What is it you want now?" "Why, we want to get home," said everyone. "Oh," said the phoenix. Yes, home, you said. Meaning?" "Where we live, where we slept last night, where the altar is that your egg was hatched on." That's the fireplace. "Oh, there," said the phoenix. "Well, I'll do my best." It fluttered onto the carpet and walked up and down for a few minutes in deep thought. Then it drew itself up proudly. "I can help you," it said. "I am almost sure I can help you. Unless I am grossly deceived, I can help you. You won't mind my leaving you for an hour or two?" And without waiting for a reply, it soared up through the dimness of the tower into the brightness above. "Now," said Cyril firmly, "it's said an hour or two, but I've read about captives and people shut up in dungeons and catacombs and things awaiting release, and I know each moment is an eternity. Those people always do something to pass the desperate moments. It's no use our trying to tame spiders, because we shan't have time." "I hope not," said Jane doubtfully, "but we ought to scratch our names on the stones or something." "I say, talking of stones," said Robert, "you see that heap of stones against the wall over in that corner? Well, I'm certain there's a hole in the wall there, and I believe it's a door." "Yes, look here. The stones are round like an arch in the wall, and here's the hole. It's all black inside." He had walked over to the heap as he spoke and climbed up to it, dislodged the top stone of the heap, and uncovered a little dark space. Next moment, everyone was helping to pull down the heap of stones, and very soon everyone threw off its jacket, for it was warm work. "It is a door," said Cyril, wiping his face, "and not a bad thing either, if," he was going to add, "if anything happens to the phoenix," but he didn't, for fear of frightening Jane. He was not an unkind boy when he had leisure to think of such things. The arched hole in the wall grew larger and larger. It was very, very black, even when compared with the sort of twilight at the bottom of the tower. It grew larger because the children kept pulling off the stones and throwing them down into another heap. The stones must have been there a very long time. For they were covered with moss and some of them were stuck together by it, so it was fairly hard work, as Robert pointed out. When the hole reached to about halfway between the top of the arch and the tower, I have no idea what that means. Robert and Cyril let themselves down cautiously on the inside and lit matches. Obviously halfway down what they think is the door, I suppose. Let themselves down cautiously on the inside and lit matches, because boys used to carry matches in their pockets back then. How thankful they felt that they had a sensible father who did not forbid them to carry matches. There you go. As some boys' fathers do. The father of Robert and Cyril only insisted on the matches being of the kind that strike only on the box, what are labelled now as safety matches. In the old days, matches could be struck on many things. That's why in Western movies, when someone's lighting a match, or in some of the old things where they still had matches, not too old, someone would take a match and would strike it on the doorpost or on the window pane or on the underside of their shoe, because it was the friction that would light the chemicals, cause the chemicals to light. And the newer version that you had to actually use against the side of the box, which has a special panel on it for lighting them on, were invented because the other sort, if they got shaken together too much, they would burst into flame. And if you're carrying a box of matches in your pocket, it's not a good thing. Yes. So father insisted that they had safety matches if they were going to have matches with them. Oh dear, it's still looking terrible over on the other monitor. And yes, I will load a better version of this if I manage to find that the current version that is available to you on Twitch is a bad version. I shall upload a better version because my computer is recording what I see, the video part of it, and then you'll be able to see it from there. You won't have the overlay, but that doesn't matter because there's not a lot on there. Right. So the boys were down there. The father had insisted that they had the kind of matches that only strike on the box. It's not a door, it's a sort of tunnel, said Robert to the girls after the first match had flared up, flickered and gone out. Stand off or push some more stones down. They did, amid deep excitement, and now the stone heap was almost gone, and before them the girls saw the dark archway leading to unknown things. All doubts and fears as to getting home were forgotten in this thrilling moment. It was like Monte Cristo. It was like, I say, cried Anthea suddenly, come out. There's always bad air in places like that have been shut up. It makes your torches go out and then you die. It's called fire damp, I believe. Come out, I tell you. The urgency of her tone actually brought the boys out, and then everyone took up its jacket and fanned the dark arch with it, so as to make the air fresh inside. When Anthea thought the air inside must be freshened by now, Cyril led the way into the arch. The girls followed, and Robert came last, because Jane refused to tail the procession lest something should come in after her and catch up with her from behind. Cyril advanced cautiously, lighting match after match and peering before him. It's a vaulting roof, he said, and it's all stone. All right, Panther, don't keep pulling at my jacket. Panther is Anthea. It's the family nickname for her. Don't keep pulling at my jacket. The air must be all right because of the matches, silly. And look out, there are steps down. Don't go any further, said Jane, in an agony of reluctance. A very painful thing, by the way, to be in. I'm sure there are snakes or dens of lions or something. Do let's go back and come some other time with candles and bellows for the fire damp. How? Come back another time? "Let me get in front of you then," said the stern voice of Robert from behind. "This is exactly the place for buried treasure, and I'm going on anyway. You can stay behind if you like." And then, of course, Jane consented to go on. So, very slowly and carefully, the children went down the steps. There were 17 of them. And at the bottom of the steps were more passages branching 4 ways, and a sort of low arch on the right-hand side made Cyril wonder what it could be, for it was too low to be the beginning of another passage. So he knelt down and lit a match, and stooping very low, he peeped in. "There's something," he said, and reached out his hand. It touched something that felt more like a damp bag of marbles than anything else that Cyril had ever touched. "I believe it is buried treasure," he cried, and it was, for even as Anthea cried out, "Oh, hurry up, squirrel, fetch it out," Cyril pulled out a rotting canvas bag about as big as the paper ones the greengrocer gives you, with Barcelona nuts in for 6pence. I'm not sure what Barcelona nuts are. You can look those up and put them in the chat or in the comments on YouTube. "There's a lot more of it, a lot more," he said. As he pulled, the rotten bag gave way, and the gold coins ran and spun and jumped and bumped and chinked and clinked on the floor of the dark passage. I wonder what you would say if you suddenly came upon a buried treasure. What Cyril said was, "Oh, bother, I've burnt my fingers," and as he spoke he dropped the match. And it was the last. There was a moment of desperate silence. Then Jane began to cry. "Don't," said Anthea, "don't, pussy. You'll exhaust the air if you cry. We can get out all right." "Yes," said Jane through her sobs, "and find the phoenix has come back and gone away again because it thought we'd gone home some other way, and oh, I wish we hadn't come." Everyone stood quite still. Only Anthea cuddled Jane up to her and tried to wipe her tears in the dark. "Don't," said Jane. "That's my ear. I'm not crying with my ears." "Come on, let's get out," said Robert. But that was not so easy, for no one could remember exactly which way they had come. Remember, there were several tunnels. It is very difficult to remember things in the dark unless you have matches with you, and then, of course, it is quite different, even if you don't strike one. Everyone had come to agree with Jane's constant wish, and despair was making the darkness blacker than ever, when quite suddenly the floor seemed to tip up, and a strong sensation of being in a whirling lift came upon everyone. All eyes were closed. One's eyes always are in the dark, don't you think? When the whirling feeling stopped, Cyril said, "Earthquakes!" and they all opened their eyes. They were in their own dingy breakfast room at home, and how light and bright and safe and pleasant and altogether delightful it seemed after that dark underground tunnel. The carpet lay on the floor, looking as calm as though it had never been for an excursion in its life. On the mantelpiece stood the phoenix, waiting with an air of modest yet sterling worth for the thanks of the children. "But how did you do it?" they asked, when everyone had thanked the phoenix again and again. "Oh, I just went and got a wish from your friend the Samoyed." "But how did you know where to find it?" "I found that out from the carpet. These wishing creatures always know all about each other. They're so clannish, like the Scots, you know, all related." "But the carpet can't talk, can it?" "No. But then how did I get the Samoyed's address?" "I tell you, I got it from the carpet." "Did it speak then?" "No," said the phoenix thoughtfully. "It didn't speak. But I gathered my information from something in its manner. I was always a singularly observant bird." It was not until after the cold mutton and the jam tart, as well as the tea and bread and butter, because it's lunch and dinner, I suspect, or lunch and afternoon tea, that anyone found time to regret the golden treasure which had been left scattered on the floor of the underground passage, and which indeed no one had thought of till now, since the moment when Cyril had burnt his fingers at the flame of the last match. "What owls and goats we were," said Robert. "Look how we've always wanted treasure, and now—" "Never mind," said Anthea, trying as usual to make the best of it. "We'll go back again and get it all, and then we'll give everybody presents." More than a quarter of an hour passed most agreeably in arranging what presents should be given to whom, and when the claims of generosity had been satisfied, the talk ran for 50 minutes on what they would buy for themselves. It was Cyril who broke in on Robert's almost too technical account of the motor car on which he meant to go to and from school. "There," he said, "dry up. It's no good. We can't ever go back. We don't know where it is." "Don't you know?" Jane asked the Phoenix wistfully. "Not in the least," the Phoenix replied in a tone of amiable regret. "Then we've lost the treasure," said Cyril. And they had. "But we've got the carpet." "And the Phoenix," said Anthea. "Excuse me," said the bird with an air of wounded dignity. "I do so hate to seem to interfere, but surely you must mean the Phoenix and the carpet." There you go. The book title has been spoken by one of the characters. And that's the end of the chapter and of today's reading. The next chapter is called The Queen Cook. That sounds interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that. Had you any idea that that might be how they were going to get out? I must admit that I had kind of forgotten about that as a possibility, that maybe the Phoenix would be able to go and talk to the Samiad, because the Samiad can grant wishes. Now, the children had promised that they wouldn't get any more wishes from him themselves, but because the Phoenix hadn't asked before, as far as we know, I'm guessing that he's able to do it. So there you go. There's the first direct reference to the Phoenix, the Samiad that we've had in this book, apart from the children mentioning it and the story mentioning him, but actually interacting with the Samiad in any way. Right, so there we go. That's it. It's all over. Time to go home. Well, I'm at home already. Time to go on and do some other things, whatever they are. I hope you've enjoyed today's reading, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.